Hey, welcome to the Simple Nutrition Podcast, a show that helps you learn practical and actual nutrition tips from an expert. I am your host, Leonila Campos, a registered dietitian with over 8 years of experience in the nutrition field. Hey, welcome back to another episode in the Simple Nutrition Insights Podcast. I am your host, Leonila Campos, registered dietitian. And today I welcome back Dr. Mendoza to another episode. In today's episode, we're going to talk about endometriosis and how physical therapy can help. First, full disclaimer, you will hear my little one in the background. He's sick, and so we're making it happen anyway. So, Dr. Mendoza, welcome back to another episode with me.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, awesome. So I know we did one episode on PCOS, right?
Yes.
And physical therapy. And so we did talk about the importance of other conditions, right, that physical therapy can help. And so endometriosis is a big one too. And so I wanted to bring you back and talk about that. So let's start with maybe what endometriosis is, and then go from there.
All right. Well, again, thank you for having me back. So endometriosis is basically a condition, right, in which the tissue that usually goes in your uterus, that grows in your uterus when you're having a menstrual cycle, grows outside of the uterus, right? And so because you're basically having tissue growing where it's not supposed to be having, it causes problems, right, within the cycle. This usually happens right for women who are of what we call childbearing ages, right? So around when you start having a period, whether it's 12, 13 years old up until usually about 45. Okay. And it grows on the outside, usually on the outside of the uterus, sometimes on the fallopian tubes. And what happens is because that growth is there, it starts to sometimes what we call adhesions. It kind of makes things stick together because when you're menstruating, right, you have that, and then when you menstruate, your body gets rid of all of that lining, right? But when it's outside of the uterus, there's no way for your body to get rid of the lining because where it's supposed to go, right? Like you're not shedding through the uterus. So all those things basically can cause irritation. It forms scar tissue, and because of that, you have basically what's the biggest symptom is having a lot of pelvic pain, right? And so usually that manifests mostly during like periods, right? The women who suffer from this lot of having, for the most part, very painful periods, they can also have pain with intercourse, pain with bowel movements, urination. They have excessive bleeding. Sometimes, their menstrual cycles are very, very long. And about half of the women who suffer from infertility are thought to be suffering from infertility because of endometriosis. So it's like a good amount, right? It happens to about 10% of those women. So, I mean, if you think about it in the United States, that's like millions of women, right? You might think like, oh, 10% is not that much, but it kind of is. We're talking about millions of women during that age that it impacts.
Right. Yeah. And when we just think about having, our regular periods, right, regular cycles, we have symptoms, right, where we notice that, oh, we're going to start, or even when we're in it, right, we have sometimes really strong symptoms. And so will you say that someone that maybe has symptoms and they're maybe for them, they're normal, right, that are really painful, but they've been having them like that since they started.
Yes.
And they
So
don't
sometimes
know,
it's
right?
hard. Yes, sometimes it's hard because you only know what you feel, right? And to you, it might be quote unquote normal. And I think sometimes, we see TV or you see things and they're like, oh, yeah, your period is supposed to be painful. But you don't realize like how painful it really is, right? Because it is a little normal to have pain, but if you're having such pain, because these women sometimes have such pain that's literally affecting their entire lives, right? They can't go through with their normal everyday lives because the pain is just so bad. And so it is also that sometimes it takes a really long time. It's a disease that takes a long time also to diagnose because it's hard, right, to be like, well, how painful is painful, or how long is the period like too long? Because it varies all within, women,
Right.
right? But there is like
It's just
certain
almost like you almost have to
factors, right,
learn
that
what
some women
normal
have
is, right?
that you
Like
think
what
to be,
normal.
yeah, to be like, hey, yeah, like there's a bigger chance you have it. Like if you have somebody in your family, like if your mom or an aunt, right, or a sister, like has endometriosis, there's to be a genetic factor. So there's also a bigger chance that you can have it, right? If you first started having periods like really early, and we consider that like kind of like before like 11 years old, there's like a connection there. That if that's real early, that that you might have endometriosis. If you're having all this pain and these issues. Also, if the length of your menstrual cycle is really shorter than what we quote unquote consider normal, because it tends to be about like a 27 to 30-day cycle, right? We all know it. So some of these women have a period, unfortunately, like almost like every 2 weeks, right? Like it's such a short time. So if you're having those kind of symptoms, then that's something you can talk to your doctor about, right? Like to be like, hey, yeah, I know it's painful, but to me, to you, it should be painful. But anytime you're experiencing some kind of pain where you just feel like it's affecting you in any way, like that's when you should go and see a health professional. Like, don't just be like, oh no, this is normal. It's fine. All women have pain. Like, I never advocate for that ever.
Yeah, so definitely learning, right? Obviously, we know ourselves more than anyone else, but we also have to not compare, right? But know the signs if we have like really painful cycle or periods, right? Or like you said, that maybe they're really short, or you notice that, okay, every 2 weeks I have one, right? We know that that's probably not normal. So looking into that, right? And finding out more, a self advocate, right? Like if you're not finding the answers, maybe look for them somewhere else. And
Yes.
so that's definitely important to remember too, right?
Yeah, and to advocate for
So
yourself.
with endometriosis, right? When you work with your patients, obviously you ask lots of questions. I know we talked about
Yes.
these in our first interview,
Last time,
right?
yeah.
That we just ask so many questions to try to learn about the patient as a whole. But with endometriosis, right? Maybe what are some of the questions that you ask them to help you help them?
Basically just very simple questions like when did you start your period? Right. And at first, like how long is your cycle? Like to keep track of like, well, how painful it is, right? So sometimes what helps is because you deal with this all the time. So it's help us to keep a diary, right? Like what we call like a little diary. So the day like they start the period, like symptoms that they're feeling, like rating the pain, right? You know how you go to the doctor and tell you, what's your pain, 0 to 10, like then that way you can kind of keep track that, like any other symptoms, right? Like the pain, like if you're kind of to describe the pain, sometimes I tell them like just like going through that way. And so when you have kind of like a journal and it's written down, you can kind of go through it and see, okay, this is not normal or is like normal, because anything again that disrupts your life, right? Even if we have different pain thresholds, but I also ask my patients like, do you feel like this just disrupt your life? Can you go about your work day, or like your day at home when you're on your menstrual cycle and you feel like like it doesn't affect you too much? So we just talk about those kind of things, right? Because again, some people can take a little bit more, but anytime it's affecting your quality of life or anything like that, that's when something needs to be done.
Have you got any clients that maybe they have no idea that they have endometriosis, but they're having like the symptoms, and like how do you go about that?
Yeah, so because one of the major symptoms is pelvic pain, right? Sometimes we do get patients that are like, oh, like I have this pain, and they're kind of, wondering like what they can do to help, especially because in this world, like you kind of take it like as a normal that you have painful periods, and so they're like, oh, well, I don't want to complain, or it's that kind of thing, right? So I ask a lot of questions. Simple questions, right? Like again, we were talking about the risk factors. Like, oh, when did you start your period? Like, how long does it last? Uh, Tell me a little bit more about the symptoms or that kind of thing. One of the things I do is have them keep like a little journal, right? To kind of go out through about the day and to write down like any symptoms they had, even when you're not on your actual, cycle, like because we have things that happen before and after. Just kind of write down, and this day I felt this day I felt that. To rate their pain every day, to be like, this day I felt this much pain or that kind of thing. And so it kind of help us keep track a little bit, right? But what I tell my patients all the time is like, hey, just because you think, that it's normal sometimes to have pain, if at any point it's affecting your quality of life, right? Because we talk about like when you're on your cycle, can you work? Are you fine at work? Are you fine at home? Do you have to like stop or you can't? Anytime anything is quite affecting your quality of life, that something needs to be done about it, right? To go see your doctor, your OBGYN, something like that, because you might think like, oh no, it's fine other people go through it, but no, because now it's affecting you, right? It doesn't matter whether I could stomach that kind of pain or anything like that. It doesn't matter. It's you and your quality of life. Anytime anything, right? And that this, we're talking about menstruation affects it, or this pelvic pain affects your quality of life, then we should see somebody about it.
Right. Yeah, especially when you're not able to do things like your daily things, right? Or you're on bed because the pain is so much, right? Or maybe
Mm-hmm.
you're just bleeding a lot, right? And like you can't even
Mm-hmm.
move because it just feels so uncomfortable. And so all those things like could essentially not are not normal. And so then you have now this patient, right, that's coming to you because of endometriosis, and they're having like this pelvic pain. What do you do after that? Like, what are some of the things that you help with, or how do you help them in that sense?
Yes. So we talked about this a little bit the last time, but what I do is a lot of manual therapy, right? So when I was telling you about what it is a little bit, we were talking about these adhesions. So sometimes if you're having adhesions, right, for the most part, what happens is, again, your body has a natural mobility, and even in your organs, right? Even your uterus, your fallopian tubes, everything right down there has to have a little bit of mobility. So when you talk about these adhesions, it's basically scar tissue. And I don't know if you've ever had like a scar big enough that if you look at your skin, it keeps it from moving, like a little bit normally. It's different, right? And so it's the same thing inside of you. You have your ovaries. Imagine having that scar tissue, and so it's inhibiting mobility, right? So now, again, what happens? You're having pain. You're having it even affects again your cycle because it's on your ovaries, that kind of thing. So with the manual work that I do, it goes in, and it's not comfortable, right? Telling patients it's not comfortable. And also, I talk to them the whole time through, and I'm like, you have to let me know if it's too much. And sometimes, we have to break down when we're doing manual work, and that's fine. To go through there and break up those adhesions, to come back and give the mobility that your uterus and your ovaries like need to be able to like function correctly, right? And then to come and bring that better blood flow, move out like drainage, like lymph fluid. And so it helps with that. So when you regain that mobility, again, you're lessening the pain that comes with not having those mobile organs like you should, right? When you're again bringing in like better blood flow to kind of just go in there and heal through everything, it helps. Um, Unfortunately, a lot of women will have to have a surgical procedure sometimes to get this stuff removed because, like I was saying, when it's there and it's outside of the uterus, the body can't expel it, right? Because there's nowhere for it to go. And so, if it does get to a certain point, sometimes surgical procedures are the only way to be able to get there, to get it, kind of like taken out, and so you're not having. But it has been noted, we haven't. Like I see a great improvement in my patients all the time. Like once we go in there and get that mobility back, because the adhesions, tends to be, but a lot again causes pain when things are supposed to be mobile and they're not.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, and those are really good news, right? And I don't think a lot of people know that, right? That you're able to do something like that with a specialist, right? Because I'm sure they have to go to someone that knows what they're doing,
Yes.
specialist
Oh,
to
yes.
be able to do that in a safe way. Not just like anybody that says, "Oh, I can totally do that." Right? I know we were talking about something similar when we went to the health fair, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, what was this? What was the name that they gave? Like that someone said, "Oh, that's what you do," and you corrected them, but it's not the same, right? Like someone that is just that they don't have the qualifications to do it versus going
Yeah,
with the
I can't remember what it was. I don't know if it was massage therapy. I can't remember what it was. And I'm like, oh. Sometimes I felt like that. But it's just, because I say this all the time and not like to disparage anybody, but sometimes I feel like as health providers, we're trying to help. We are. That's what we do. We get into this because we want to help people. But sometimes it's hard when you don't know what you don't know and you're trying to help people and you realize that maybe that's not like your realm of work, right? That you should be sending them to someone else can help them. I do that in my work all the time. Like sometimes, we're trying to have patients and things are just not moving along the way they should be. And they're like, you're getting a little bit of results, but not kind of like they should. And you're like, you know what, let's stop. Let's step back and let's go back and see the doctor. Let's go back and see this person. Do you mean to see if something else is going on? Because at the same time, I know that what I should be seeing and I don't see it, right? So that's why you go to professionals, to follow along to when they know what they're doing because they know what they're looking out for to be like, oh, you know what, let me continue, let me not continue. Like, let's add someone else right into this. And we were talking about that last time about how, we all have to be like as a community with your health providers and all working together to help everybody, right? Not in silos, not separate thing. And so I feel like, when people just kind of don't know what they don't know, sometimes it hurts.
Right. Yeah. So instead of doing good, they actually doing the opposite,
Yeah,
right?
and with the best intentions, but it's they're doing the opposite.
Right. And I think that is really important to know, and for the listeners to know, right, that if you're having pain, in this case, if you have endometriosis and you already know, right, and this is something that you're wanting to explore, going to the specialist, right, going to someone, a professional that knows what they're
Yes,
doing, because I can imagine, going through even more pain
yes.
without like being safe, essentially, right? So I
Yeah,
think that
and
is
like you're saying, and that there is other alternatives. Like I met a young lady not too long ago who was 22 and told me that she had gotten a hysterectomy at 20 because of endometriosis. And I literally, you could have picked up my jaw off the floor because I was like, wow, you know what I mean? Like so young. And she was like, oh no, it's fine. Like I know I don't want to have kids and things like that or whatever. And I was just like, I mean, that's great that you're no longer like suffering from this pain. But I was like, man, she was so young. Like to think that there is like other alternatives. I'm not saying that like what I do is going to completely like cure the pain or anything like that. It's just a tool to help, to help lessen that pain, to help to be able to deal with like a little more alongside, what I mean, obviously following along with your OBGYN and your regular doctor and stuff like that. Like there is things you can do, especially for women, who want to have children or who think about having children later on down the road, right? Like, because if the doctor's like, well, let's have a hysterectomy or let's do this, like, you're like, oh, maybe she was so young. I just couldn't believe that they would do that to someone who was so young, right? I mean, maybe she had an extreme case, which does happen sometimes, but that there is like other alternatives. Because, like I said, women who aren't who have problems with infertility, like half of them, about half, I think, ends up having problems with endometriosis. Sometimes they don't even know it because we're talking like a lot of cases, but a lot of severe cases. But sometimes you can have endometriosis and not really have really bad symptoms, and you don't know it until you're like, now you're trying to have a family, you're trying to get pregnant, and it's not happening, and you're like, wait, what's going on? You know what I mean? And then you go see a doctor, and they're like, oh, they'll either, again, talk about your history and things like that. And then they're like, well, maybe, you have endometriosis. And then that's where you're having fertility problems. And so, again, it's just one of those things that you kind of have to like know yourself and like be an advocate. And, it's one thing I have noticed, that when women are trying to get pregnant or having a little bit of issues, the internet is like their friend, right? That they can go on and they research all these things. And so they start to learn about all these things, right? Like about their body, endometriosis, their diets, right? That's one of the big things. I hear that like 99% of the time. Like, well, I changed the way that I eat, like to help with trying to fix like their infertility and things like that. And so, I want to tell people like, hey, like the information is out there, like take it and then, have a conversation with a professional, right? Because I think we talked about this last time too, that sometimes the internet gives you ideas and it's a little crazy. But it's good to be informed, right? And to know that there is these things out there that maybe you are suffering from this. You can go talk to your OBGYN and your doctor and be like, hey, I read this, I have these symptoms, like what can we do now, right?
exactly. And I love that you brought up obviously the nutrition aspect of it, because as a dietitian, that's
Yeah.
my area of expertise. And we know that, right, endometriosis is it creates inflammation, right? And
Mhm.
so there's a lot of inflammation throughout the body. And we can manage that inflammation, right, with nutrition, essentially, to a certain extent. And so we're making sure, right, that yes, we're changing our eating habits, right, because that's something that we eat for the most part every single day, 3 times a day, maybe a few snacks in between. So yeah, absolutely, what we're going to consume can affect our inflammation, but it can also help with symptoms, right? Specifically, if we're having deficiencies, right? Okay, let's address those deficiencies: zinc, magnesium, other minerals, right? If there's a lot of blood flow, right? Maybe iron, because
Yes.
there's especially the frequency of the cycles, right? We're having cycles every 2 weeks.
Yes, for those women who have those very heavy cycles and frequent cycles, and you're losing all that blood. Yes.
Right. Yeah. So checking that often, right? And I know it's not something that maybe is done in terms of like, oh, let's check your blood work, let's check your minerals, right? And so you, as a patient, right, you have that right. You can ask your doctor, hey, doctor, can we check my zinc? Can I check my magnesium, right? To make sure that if you are low, then you have a plan, right, to optimize them, to bring them back to normal levels. But at the same time, right, there is a lot of research that shows that increasing your fiber, right, increasing your protein can help manage some of the symptoms and bring down the inflammation to specifically fiber, which, fiber for the listeners is going to come from your plant sources, right? Fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, and seeds. And
Yeah,
so,
and that's an easy fix, right? Like that's an easy fix that you can be like, hey, like let me increase my fiber intake, right? It's like you have to go out and into the world and hunt down a way to increase that fiber intake, right? It's like a pretty simple thing that you can do.
right. And it's so interesting because it's, when we think about as health professionals, right, it should be a no-brainer, right? It should be so simple to do it. But believe it or not, the majority of the population hardly gets 15 grams of fiber, right? And so when we talk about,
Yes. Because we have I know you did it with a chemo like partner, but we see patients with that, right? To the constipation complaints, but also like what can lead like to, having issues with that constipation, a lot of things that we see that can be prevented, like you're saying, from just being able to like have that healthier diet and that the intake. Because that's the very first thing that even like we talk about. It's like, well, you talk about your diet and like, well, how much fiber are you taking in, right? And then they're just like, and when you look at it, like, yeah, no, nowhere near that, and you can avoid a lot of things by that. I feel like that alone, just upping your fiber intake.
right. Yeah. And like you said, right, first thing with constipation, right? Okay, let's figure out the fiber, right? Where is your fiber coming from? Are you getting any fiber, right? And so if there's hardly any fiber, and to put it in perspective, right, like if you're having vegetables at each meal, right, at least 2 cups, right, usually do visuals, 2 fistfuls, and 2 to 3 fruits in between, and then you're adding nuts and seeds, you should be able to get at least 25 grams of fiber, right? Now, if we're trying to maybe reduce inflammation some more, right, maybe decrease the estrogen or whatever the case may be, then adding more fiber, right, aiming for 30 grams of fiber. So increasing your vegetables, right, increasing maybe adding some beans and legumes to add more fiber. That's one of the ways to do it. But sometimes the hard part, and what I hear from my patients, right, is that I don't know where to get it from, right? I don't know how to incorporate it into my meals. And that's great. Let's figure out a plan for that. So in this case, I'm not saying that I want you to get a fiber supplement, right? Just because even though we might need a supplement, but if we can get it from food, right, we're going to get more nutrients from food versus taking just a supplement that you're just going to get that. And you might have to add tons of it, right? Because especially if it's a capsule form, you might have to take like 5 capsules 3 times a day, right? To get like 15 grams of fiber, like when you can have a cup of lentils to get 20 grams or something like that, right? So definitely, encouraging food first
Yes,
will be
like natural intakes, right? So that's the same thing that we talk to my patients about. Like there's things that we can do that I can help with that are like natural forms, right? When we can again, work on the body naturally, like work with exercise or manual therapy. These are all like natural things that don't have side effects, right? And I know, like I said, sometimes when I do and I do work and it's painful, it's kind of painful like at the moment, right? But then at the end, the patients are like, they can feel the difference, right? And like the pain has gone so far down. Like it regulated my menstrual cycles a little bit more, and like it's an uncomfortableness, but because again we're doing manual therapy or we're working on the body, it's all natural, right? Like with my endo patients, also with my infertility patients, right? Like these are things that we're helping the body just kind of like naturally helping it along, naturally do the stuff that we want it to do, right? As opposed to bringing all this like outside, unnatural, quote unquote, unnatural things, right? I don't know how to make supplements, but that's the things where if you could just healthily take it in and have your body like process it, right? The way that we're meant to, like the difference that it makes.
Right. Yeah. I think that's the first, hopefully the first line of intervention, right? Let's try to do it naturally and let's help your body, right? Essentially being able to get better. Of course, we might get to a point when we need something different, right?
Yes.
If we're not meeting it naturally, okay, let's add now maybe the second line of intervention.
That's something. Yeah.
Case. Exactly. And how common is, physical therapy or pelvic floor work or manual work in endometriosis, like treatment? This is the first time, when I met you guys that I learned about that. And so I don't know if it's common.
No, it's so again, we talked about last time about how we're just trying to get out that information, right? Like to do we're trying to teach people like, and it's not I want to say that maybe, oh, I can't put it into words, but it hasn't happened to me very often when I have a conversation with someone to be like, oh yeah, I've heard of that before. Like, and I meet lots of women that have endometriosis. Again, like I was telling you, it's like 1 in 10 women. There's millions of women in the United States here alone, and they're like, oh, I've never heard that, because usually, they go to the doctor, they talk about it, and the first line of kind of treatment tends to be to put someone on birth control, right? To put someone on birth control, which again, I'll leave my opinion on that kind of like out of this, right? That's a whole another thing. Maybe we'll talk about it later. But let's say, you're trying to get pregnant, right? So then your first line of defense or your treatment is going to be like, you're going to give me birth control, but I'm trying to have a family, right? And so that's the thing, is like,
Yeah.
it's not heard of, but we're trying to get out there. We're trying to get that education out there that there is something else, like we were just talking about, something that will help you, something that's natural, something that's not going to cause side effects or anything like that, right? That we can help with the pain, that we can help regulating those periods a little bit, right? Like I was saying before, it's not going to be like a complete treatment, right? I'm not saying that you're going to come to me and I'm going to get rid of all the pain and it's never going to happen to you again. Unfortunately, I wish I could, but but no,
Right. Yeah.
But again, we can help. I help manage it. When patients like I had a period this time, and it was so much less painful. Like I didn't have too much work. Like again, the quality of life difference that I see, right? And then I didn't have to go on birth control, because some of these patients aren't trying to get pregnant. Some of them are, but some just don't like they've done their research and they don't want to take birth control, right? And so I'm like, yeah, like let's do this, like let's work on this, and then hopefully, like, you don't have to do that, like again, managing like the body like as a whole, right?
Right. Yeah. That's obviously the awareness, right, and learning different ways to treat something, right. And you guys are doing the education as well. I think that is important, just to allow women, right, to have other options.
Yes.
And not, just go straight to, oh, let's just get rid of the organ, right? And so I think that is definitely important that, women have other options, because, just like with anything with surgery, if at the end of the day, right, that's what needs to happen, then we also have to consider what's coming after that, right? Like, how are we going to help someone that has a hysterectomy, right? Because it's not just like the end, right? Now
No,
we're going to
no,
have these
no.
other issues.
Oh yeah, these other things with hormones and things like that. And so Kimi and I sometimes like to put it into perspective, right? When we talk to people, we're like, hey, imagine you went to your doctor because you start to have knee pain, right? You're going to your doctor and you're like, hey, I've been having this knee pain. It's been hurting me for a while. It's starting to affect me. And the first thing the doctor was like, okay, let's have surgery. Let's get that knee out and give you a knee replacement. And then when we say that, people are horrified and they're like, oh, no, I wouldn't do it like that fast. Right. And so that's the thing, when you kind of put it into that, sometimes people like it opens up a light bulb and they're like, oh, no, yeah, I wouldn't do that. That they would seek other alternatives, right? You would go, for the most part, knee pain, things like that. You would try to lose weight. You would go to physical therapy, right? To get your legs stronger, to help you. You go through all these other alternatives before you would even think surgery. And so that's what, I want like your listeners to know, or we want like women to know, there is other alternatives that you can go through before you get to something so drastic, right? Like whether hysterectomy, and because like you said, it's not the end. Like you take that out, now you're missing organs that your body, like needs for certain reasons. So you have a whole nother issues, right, that come with no longer having those organs that, with estrogen and all those things like that. And so, believe me, that's not a walk in the park either, right? So it's not just like, hey, yeah, let's take these out and you'll be fine. There's a lot of things that kind of go along in consideration with that.
Right, exactly. And I think that's really important also for women to know that, hey, if you already had the hysterectomy, right, there shouldn't be shame there. But if
No,
you're
sure.
having issues, right, like with hormones, following up with your doctor, right, because we still have to be able to manage, we still have to be able to help those women, right, that are having hormonal issues. Or I know at one point I had someone that said, I had a hysterectomy and I'm now having like constipation, right? Like I'm having these issues
Yes.
with like fully emptying. And I know probably this is another episode, but I think people should know that, women should know that, right? That there could be those issues too.
Mm-hmm. And because sometimes, people, they're what we call more common symptoms, right? And you're like, well, I don't have that, or this is different. And you read things up, but those are just common things that women, or people, whatever they're suffering from, complain about. But everybody's different, right? You could be having symptoms, again, that are not so common, or there's symptoms that are just that for some reason your body decided to manifest it a certain way, right? And so that's why I'm like, be an advocate for yourself. Like, sometimes doctors are wonderful. Like everybody, again, we got into this profession because we want to help people, the healthcare, but sometimes uh, they need you to advocate a little bit more, to be like, hey, I know we talked about this last time and you told me like, let's change this, but I have these symptoms. It's not changing. Like, like there's something, what can we do? Like sometimes you have to be that person, and we don't want to be the person like, hey, like they're the doctor. They don't know. It's not that. It's just, you said it correctly. Like, your body, yourself, and they just know what you're telling them. Right. And so sometimes, we don't want to be pushy or anything like that, but you're not. You want to communicate like, hey, this is affecting my everyday life. Like, I can't do these things. I can't, I'm missing work. I'm doing this. I'm no longer, be able to have like fun with my family. I can't, you know what I mean? I'm short with my kids on the days that I'm going, through my cycle because I'm in pain. All those things like matter. They matter to our lives, and we might not think it, but it does. And so advocate for yourself and be like, hey, I don't want to do this. Like, what are my options? Like, what can we do? Right. And then sometimes it takes them a little bit and they're like, no, obviously they always want to help. And so they're like, yeah, this is what we can do. And then they'll give you options and then we can go from there. Right. But we got to be a little pushy sometimes, I think, for ourselves, like as women, right? We're just so used to, taking care of everyone else, like our kids and our families and things like that, that we don't want to be a burden, I feel like, to others. But, you have to take care of yourself, right? Before you can give yourself to everyone else and kind of like, be that there for everyone else. You got to be for yourself first,
Exactly. Yeah, you said it so perfectly, right? That yes, we want to take care of everybody else, right? And that's just our nature usually. And so, but you got to take care of yourself too, right? Essentially, you want to take care of yourself first to be able to continue to take care of everybody else. So, yeah, I'm sure it's so amazing to see someone, right, that she came in like maybe with so much pain, and you started working together, right? And now you see them, like you said, less pain, right? I think just that alone, being able to say, oh, I was able to get out of bed, right? Or I didn't miss work, right? Because I felt good. I'm sure that has to feel amazing, right? One, obviously for your patient, but also for you, right, as the provider.
Yeah, I have like a crazy like family, work-life balance and that kind of thing. And so on the days, right, that I'm like feeling sick and I feel guilty sometimes like for like feeling sick and not being able to like help them the way that I normally do, right? So when I talk to my patients and I see just like how, like I said, this is affecting like their everyday life, their quality of life, right? And again, not to mention the pain and sometimes, like I said, I felt it before, like the guilt and all these things like to come and when they, see me, I'm like, hey, I went through these last 2 months and I felt like so much better. It was great. Like I could manage it. Like just that, like being able to help somebody and seeing that how much better you can make their lives for something, you know what I mean? Like just to help them. I don't know, to me, like that's why I do what I do, right? Like just to be able to help people and things. And again, we say that all the time, but that's why we do what we do, right? It's that you have that impact on someone else to be able to help them, like help with their journey through this life, right? To make it a little bit easier on them so they have less pain, they sleep a little bit better, or being able to, have that time with their family, be better at work. Like I don't think there's anything better.
Right. Yeah, I definitely have to agree with that, right? Just being able to see them get better, right? Because, I mean, I don't know, I think about just having pain, right? And then intense pain and how debilitating that can be. And so I think it's amazing, right, that you're able to help somebody and just see those changes, um, and, help them feel better essentially, in a safe way. So that's great.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, great. So let's say, there's, and I know you're local, right? You guys, and
Mhm.
I don't think I even introduced the practice, right? Restore
Yeah.
Therapeutics.
There we
You guys
go.
are in Fresno, but I'll let you say
It's
all
because we're
that in a
we're
moment.
already used to talking to each other, so
Right? Yeah, like just
talking
a natural conversation here.
conversation.
Yeah. But
Yeah, so our
mhm,
practice is here in Fresno. We're out not too far from Fig Garden, out there on Shaw and Fruit. We're called Restore Therapeutics Physical Therapy. It's a Kimi and I right now, my partner. We're out there. We wanted to create like a safe space for like women, because we're a women-centered clinic, so we treat women at this time, just somewhere like safe and comfortable where they could come and like know that there's help, right? Like we said, a safe environment. There's nothing, that we can't talk about that we haven't heard before already, or that we haven't like kind of, there's a lot of things that we go through ourselves. That sometimes us women we start to get in conversations, and then we get to know each other a little bit better, and then you talk about all these things, but like we just are there like to help, right? To let the women of the Central Valley to know that, hey, again, these things are not like normal. You don't have to live with this, right? We're here to help you. There's other alternatives. We work with our patients one-on-one all the time, like sit down and we have long conversations. We talked about this before, right? About again what's going on with your life and all these things, because we're there to help treat you, but also like treat you like as a whole. Like we want to be able to help you, and you are there to tell us what we can help you with, right? And so that's just like our goal in life, to get that education out there, that we're here, that there's alternatives, like holistic alternatives, right? To help women to get through our lives, a little bit easier every day, and to help treat or help whatever it is that, that you're suffering from, or anything that's kind of keeping you from living like your best life, right? Like that's what we do. Like we're nurturing lives. That's what we talk about all the time, right? Like we're all about pelvic life wellness because we want to help people and nurture their lives. So you can come and see us. Like we're there. You can go to our website. I think you have the link down there, right? We do online booking.
mhm.
We have, and we have our time frames. But again, I not what I'm gonna say. Like I sometimes I got patients like, hey, I have to work, and like I go really early or really late. That's a great thing about having your own practice. To be like, yeah, I can get you in like super early, or I can get you super late. Like we want to help, right? And we do everything that we can to be able to help us, because that's what we're here for.
Right. And thank you for sharing that information. And I think it's wonderful that you have a location, right, an area where women essentially can come in, right, and feel comfortable with you talking about these things, because nobody talks about these things, right? Like, oh my gosh, if
Mm-hmm.
I have pain when I, have a cycle, I shouldn't talk about that. Or if I'm bleeding
Yeah.
too much, I shouldn't talk about that. These are things that we need to talk about with, as women, to be able to get better, or just to talk to other women, other health professionals about it, right? So I think that is so important that you guys encourage
Yeah,
that.
and just to have someone. So, And I'll send you the link and so you can put the link in. But there's again other resources out there. There's other support out there. The Endometriosis Association is like a website that we'll put the link to, right? So you can
Yep.
read all about it. There's just different things. There's other women on there telling their stories. You know what I mean? Like just to know that you're not alone, right? That you're out there. There's a group of community of women that are going through the same thing. That are there to help you. I think it makes us feel better to know that we're not alone, right? Or to be like, hey, that you're not the only one going through this, and that there is help out there, but there's also like support, someone that you, like you said, that you can talk to be like, I went through this, like just to help each other out, right?
Right, exactly. And also to not feel like you are the problem, right? Like it's
Yes.
your fault. I think that especially for women, I see this a lot when I have my female clients, right? Like they blame themselves, like this is my
Yes.
fault.
Yes. Yeah. And you know what? You're right. And I see that too, to be like, because sometimes, the patients will ask, like, well, did I do something wrong? Right. Did this happen or whatever? I get that, especially with my patients who are suffering from infertility, right? That's a whole nother thing. Maybe we can do, I'm already invited myself to your next
Yeah,
podcast. Maybe we
absolutely.
can do another podcast like on infertility, but I do see that a lot, right? To be like, did I do something wrong? Like, what did I do that caused this and things like that? You know what I mean? And it's to know you're right. Like that it's not you, right? Genetically, like also environmental factors have a lot to play with it, right? And those things that we can't really change, but there is things that we can change, right? To kind of counterbalance those things that we can't change, like the diet, right? Like the exercise, like the things that I do to help, like with manual therapy, to help it along, doing the things we can't. But for them to not feel like, hey, yeah, I did something wrong, or there's something wrong with me, when that's not it, right?
Right. I love that you said, right, doing the things that we can do, right? Essentially, where can we change, right? The things that we have control, the right control over, right?
Yes.
Versus like, oh, the environment. Well, there's not a lot of things that we can do about that. But nutrition, right? That we can absolutely do, right? Like we can focus on nutrition, or like you said, exercise, right? We can go see Dr. Mendoza, right, and work on that. Those are things that we are able to have that direct impact. And like focusing on that, right, really helps. But absolutely, right, just being able to be in a community with other women, right, that are going through the same thing, and not to feel alone, right? That, again, this could be just a lonely process, or feel like nobody's there
It
to help
can,
me.
exactly, because and that leads to like the loneliness and just symptoms. When women have to deal with these kind of things, it's not obviously like a big step to think like, hey, they also deal with other things like feelings of depression, or things like that. Again, this is like something affecting your daily life, right? When you feel alone, or in pain, all those things, it affects us, not only physically but mentally, right? And so that that one of those things that helps with those things is to be able to know that you're not alone, to have that support, to be able to talk to someone about it, and those kind of things. And then, like we were talking about, doing the things that we can do, that we can control, to help with it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And doing it with the help of health professionals too, like
Yes.
us. Great. Perfect. And so are you guys still offering the series of classes as well? You guys are doing on Saturdays, I think. Are you guys still doing them?
So the classes right now, we change it up a little bit because sometimes our patients can. So right now I'm doing a Tuesday. We're doing a Tuesday night class. So basically, we kind of take it by month to month, right? And so when we get messages or things like that, and we're like, oh, like we want to take the class, and so we kind of, if we, I guess, first come first serve, right? If I have my couple of patients, and then we kind of figure out like what day works for best, or I say, hey, we're going to do this day. So right now we're changing it up. We did Saturday. Right now we're doing Tuesday. I think next month we might be doing a Friday one. We're trying to, so that we can fit into different people's schedules, right? Because not everybody is available like Saturday mornings, because especially in the summertime, I don't know about you, but we get super busy in the summertime to be available like on the weekends. But we do, we're doing our classes, like I said, Tuesday night. And those are a little bit more general classes to just kind of help with the general things. But again, the people who take our classes are come, and then they're just like, oh, I jumped the other day and I didn't, leak, and it's great that they have to. But there's things that when it's like I said, general, right? Like it's like your general, like working out. Sometimes you need a little bit more specific, and again, that's what we're there for. But we want to help those who have obviously specific problems and those who just what I call need a little tune-up. And that's what we kind of do our classes for. But right now, Tuesdays, yeah. So, but if you follow us on Instagram, which is like at restore_therapeutics, we post about our classes. Like the next class is going to start this time, like DMS, and we can get you in and that kind of stuff. So following us on Instagram is a great way to kind of like, follow up to know when we're having the next class and all the other stuff that we're doing around the clinic.
Awesome. Yeah. And I'll link the Instagram page in the show notes too, so people have that as well. Okay, Dr. Mendoza, thank you so much for your time. Any final thoughts and any final information that you want to provide or that you want to share?
I just, again, like I say it all the time, like know that there's other resources out there to help you. Know that professionals like us are here to help you. We want to help you live your best life, right? And that's just what we're here for. That's why we got into this. We want to help you know that there's other things that you can do that are not so drastic, right? That there's things along the way and that there's people along the way to help you.
Thank you. Awesome. Yeah, those are great final thoughts, right? Knowing that, yes, maybe you now have these diagnoses, right? And as looking for that help and finding resources that can help you, right, is really important. And not allowing the diagnosis, right, to overtake you, essentially. Sometimes that can be difficult to, like, when you have a diagnosis and you're like, okay, but not letting it define you, right? You're still you.
No.
And so getting that help. Awesome. All right. Well, perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. Mendoza. I know we
thanks
definitely
for having me again.
Absolutely. We'll have to do another one on infertility. I think that's a huge one too.
Yes,
so
I deal with that a lot. So
right, yeah. So I'm sure the public, right, the listeners will benefit from that too. So we'll schedule that for sure.
Awesome.
But yeah, thank you so much. Thank you everybody for listening. Remember to stay healthy and stay strong. I'll see you and I'll talk to you in another episode. Bye-bye for now. This podcast, the links and resources provided are for the purpose to educate only and are not a replacement for medical advice or nutrition therapy. I suggest you seek out the help of a trained professional to help you with your specific situation and needs.